Oh, come on. There we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. This is another edition of Training Friday of the Bullet. Tom and I just did a regular broadcast of the Bullet an hour ago. Now he comes back. He joins me from the Firearms Academy Seattle Satellite Studios. And we're talking Training Friday today. Tom, and for a proper introduction, because it's an entirely different episode, I should say, Tom Walls is the senior instructor in all ways of the word at the Firearms Academy Seattle. And today we wanted to talk a little bit about one-handed shooting. And Tom, and as we get started, I want to, if you have comments about anything we're talking about, and this episode is entirely about training and the art of shooting. If you have comments, go ahead and comment wherever you're at. We get most comments, but if you don't see your comment pop up in just a few minutes, come over to the Polite Society Podcast, Facebook, and YouTube pages. We get those, and we get them quickly, and I will get those up. But what we want to talk about today, as we get started here, Tom, my very first gun training course, the first thing they taught us to do was to shoot two-handed, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then shortly after that, we started shooting one-handed, and specifically, we started shooting non-dominant hand, which for me is the left hand. And the reason given was, if you ever are really in a gunfight, both people in that gunfight get what's called target fixation, and they fixate on what is most dangerous, and that would be the gun. And they, not intentionally, but the shots intend to go what they're paying attention to the most, which is the hand that's holding the gun. So even at two-handed shooting, there's a high probability, if you're in a gunfight, that gun hand might get shot. Therefore, you need to be able to shoot with just one hand, both dominant and non-dominant hand. So let's go ahead and get into one-handed shooting. What have you got to start with, man?
Well, one-handed shooting is a big bag of what-ifs. So first, let me do an aside. You're very kind to call me the senior instructor. My business card just says staff instructor, although there's only one other instructor currently on staff that has been around longer than I have, and that gentleman only teaches a couple, 3 times a season. So I appreciate the boost, but it's not official. That said, to be honest, getting back to one-handed shooting, it's interesting if you look at the targets that have depictions of real people or cartoons of people or good photographs, cartoon targets, if you will, that have a weapon. Because in some classes, as you learn the basics of shooting, you need to learn how to make good decisions with a gun in your hand, and that includes looking at the hands to discriminate who's got a weapon and who has something else. And a lot of those bullet holes you'll find from other classes cluster around, and this is a dummy gun, cluster around the hand that's holding the picture of the gun or the knife or the weapon. Diane and I my lovely wife and I were just at Gunsight last week for a class that did do some one-handed shooting, which I'll refer to in this segment. But a lot of the bullet holes in the shoot house, the live fire shoot house they have at Gunsight, were clustered around the picture of the weapon. We see it here at FAS all the time. You're fixating on the threat. That's what you do. Cops, on the other end of that, know that if a bad guy is looking at their gun in the holster, that's a clue that there might be a gun grab about to come. If I'm fisticuffs, I'm sparring or fighting, and I see somebody constantly looking at a certain part of my body, they're fixating on the target, and that's where the next blow is likely to come. So you're exactly right. We get fixated on that, and it's not at all unusual in a gunfight to get an injury to the dominant hand, to shoot non-dominant. So when we teach one-handed shooting, Often we're not teaching everybody everything because it takes a progression. Back in the day, you'd hear people say 2 hands on the gun. It's a hand gun, not a hands gun. I scored a copy of, not a first edition, but a second print of Ed McGivern's classic Fast and Fancy Revolver Shooting, which was published in the 20s. I'd have to look at the date. Older, a century-ish ago. He talks about shooting with 2 hands. It's not a new thing. It's kind of gone away over time and come back. We had the cowboy shooting, and it's come back. Jeff Cooper really entrenched it, God bless him, with the modern technique to get 2 hands on the gun. We all know we can shoot accurately, and we've talked about this before, again, with this dummy gun, with literally the trigger finger and the thumb and these fingers hanging out in the breech. The problem that happens when you do this, you get one accurate shot, but you don't have enough grip for recoil control, the gun shifts in your hand. And that's what happens, the difference between a full one-handed grip and a two-handed grip, whichever grip you like. Thumbs down, thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs stitched together with nylon cord. I really don't care. We can address that one-on-one. The reason this started out as a handgun because the cavalry soldiers had to have one hand for the reins. Carbines were nice, but you still had a moving horse with the reins, so they would shoot the gun with one hand and hold the horse with the other. But as we got to standing on our hind legs, we shot the gun with one hand because we'd always done that, and that's how it was done until it evolved. But there are times when you need to shoot with one hand.
Well, and I'm thinking back to the publications, same era, 20s, 30s, on up into the 50s, where you see, and I'm gonna have to try to turn myself sideways. I don't think it's all gonna get in camera anyway. You see the target shooters with one hand, can be even stuffed in their front pocket, the other one straight out in front of them, and they're half bladed and just not very, what today's standards would be, not very tactical.
It wasn't meant to be. It was bullseye shooting, what we call bullseye shooting. The slow fire stuff was ridiculously slow, so you had time to readjust the gun in your hand. But that's classic, and it's certainly a skilled piece of shooting. But for self-defense shooting, which is my bailiwick and where I live, 2 hands is nice because you need to get more than one shot off. The problem is, coming back to that, the way we teach it is only partial. We teach it with the dummy gun. Oh, I love the wheels on the chair. Okay, this is my two-handed, and we'll just do for the waist up. We'll ignore the feet. 2 hands. One hand, I'm taking my non-dominant hand, palm up, tight grip, tight against the body. I'm flexing the big muscles of the back and the chest and the core. So I've got something when this gun recoils to pull it back because it's going to recoil into the empty space. That's great. And you can talk about where your feet need to be. Different instructors do different things. Problem is, that assumes my hand works and I can make the fist, and the body, the torso will allow me to do this. It assumes a healthy body.
Yes.
The reason we teach it that way is to get used to that recoil that's different and making sure you have a good solid grip on it. Yeah. This is where we need to go past that to get into combat application.
I remember, again, going back to my first handgun training these years ago, and two-handed shooting, the gun goes straight up. Dominant hand shooting, gun goes mostly straight up. Non-dominant hand, gun goes whoa, 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 way off to the side.
Your brain has to activate the right muscles. The muscles can even be of equal strength. If you get on the weight stack, they can do the equal number of pounds. But your brain has to send the signal to all of that muscle to get it to innervate. So that's why you get big strength increases at first when you start resistance training, because it's nervous system as much as it is muscle. And if you don't shoot with one hand, that changes the whole dynamic, and the brain's got to wire that way. When you switch to non-dominant hand, it's almost like shooting a new shooter.
Mm-hmm.
Reasons to shoot with just one hand usually come with, we talk about injury. I have not been in a gunfight. My training has been successful. I've avoided them. I would like to continue that and die some other way. But if it should happen, I've done enough of it. And if I need to shoot with one hand, I've got this plan. I can go, as Colonel Cooper famously said, I knew that would happen someday, and I know what to do. You're not going into new territory. The old thing about the cops back in the day only knew how to shoot with one hand or didn't know how to shoot if they were knocked to the ground, what we call disadvantaged position nowadays. And they didn't know what to do because it was new territory they'd never been exposed to. Cool thing about a variety of training is that you're exposed to new situations that maybe hadn't popped into your head before. Some of those last week, which is why a good instructor is always going outside their own organization. Get your head up out of the weeds and see what else is. A couple of reasons for one-handed shooting besides injury could be, perhaps I've got somebody that I need to guide. Okay? Oh, I'm going to make another disclaimer. We have Loki, the princeling of chaos, 4-month-old coon cat, who I have no control over. You see this gray blur just... Anyway, if I've got a principal, someone I've got to guide out of a movie theater where there's an active shooter situation, and I can't get them to just hang on to my belt to leave my hands free, I've got to physically guide them. Somebody that's elderly, somebody not mentally in the game, either by youth or age or some other thing, that other hand, my non-dominant hand's got to guide them. I've got to do all my work with this. To go through a door. Okay, I've got to take two hands off the gun. In whatever ready position is appropriate, I've got to get a hand off that gun to actuate a door. Or something else, or a cell phone, or a flashlight, or almost an infinite number of things we need to be able to do. So just because you shoot really well in a square range doesn't mean you have everything you need to carry out in the world. You've got to go into real world. Manipulating something with a non-dominant hand or manipulating someone with your non-dominant. Even exiting a vehicle, can you do that without using your hands? You've got to be able to put rounds down range just with that one. And then it goes further into the weeds from there.
Sure. I'm going to make a little bit of a left turn here, and I'm going to introduce something because you reminded me of it that we hadn't planned on talking about today.
It'd be a non-dominant turn.
Let me get two comments in here first. First from CNT Designs and Arms. He says, I know I need to practice more one-handed, especially with my offhand.
I hear you.
And Spartan 6 says, something I heard recently really hit home. People don't rise to the occasion. They fall to the level of their training. And that is good wisdom. Not only that, they fall, I'm going to say they don't fall to the highest level of their training either.
You fall to baseline. That, I wish I had remembered who said that. We're talking about some ancient BC era dude said that. In some BC era dude language, Greek or Latin or something. No, you're not good at figuring out new situations under stress. And it gets back to that, practice makes perfect is not correct thing we always say. It's perfect practice makes. So you will do what you have done, and part of that is knowing that you can.
Well, now our non-dominant turn. I was on social media, specifically Facebook, a while back, and a very good friend of mine was relating a story where he and his wife were walking from a store to their vehicle, and bags full of groceries, and Tweaker comes up and asks for money, and my friend was embarrassed that the easiest thing to do was give him a couple of bucks out of the pocket, and the guy went away. And he's like, how am I supposed to, my right hand was occupied with bags. I made the comment of, well, if your hands are occupied and things get really bad and you've got to start a draw stroke, the first thing you do is drop forward towards whatever you're holding, cell phone, keys, money, bags of groceries. Drop it and drop it forward towards the threat. That's going to give them something to focus on as your hand is going to start the draw stroke.
I would say to that gentleman that for a couple of bucks, he got a really good lesson cheap.
Yes.
Nobody got hurt. He learned something in a way that he will remember it. And that's important because you have to go, oh, that's so important. I can't let that go. I need to change what I'm doing about that. And I bet that's changed what he does. I will confess, I posted this on my private Facebook page. While at Gunsight, from Freddie Bliss, it's not a sanctioned Gunsight thing, but it is a Freddie Bliss thing. I earned my moose cock pack. If you know, you know. I will let you look it up because it's not exactly family friendly, but it takes an egregious mistake, not an unsafe mistake, but an egregious technique mistake. I will not ever do that again. So this dude, a lot cheaper than the embarrassment that I got for getting the award, figured something out. Keep your gun hand free. Or, as you said, Paul, very correctly, gravity works great. Let it drop. Well, we're conditioned not to do that. You know, you're not going to under stress go, well, you know, the gravity, I can just drop it because we're conditioned not to. Your mind's going to be preoccupied with a lot of other stuff. So we know we need to do one-hand shooting with the dominant hand because of the doorknobs, escorting someone in some condition, whatever it may be, carrying the groceries that you don't want to drop. You know, hey, if it's eggs, I know eggs are expensive, but it's still cheaper than all the legal stuff after if you have to shoot. What about your non-dominant hand? Okay? What about your non-dominant hand? Well, I'm not going to get in a gunfight, so my other hand's not going to get shot. Well, that's not the only thing. Who amongst us has not had a boo-boo on their dominant hand? You're washing dishes. I had somebody in the family was washing dishes. It was a glass, drinking glass. Glass breaks, bad cut. That hand's out of the game for a few weeks. I had extensive shoulder surgery on my dominant side. My dominant hand was in a sling for 2 months.
Yeah.
The shoot, fortunately, I had practiced ahead of time. And I went, oh, I knew this would happen someday, and I know what to do. And I had a left-handed holster, non-dominant holster, and a firearm that fit that with all the controls where I could reach them. I practiced one-handed manipulations. Hey, guys, if you can't clear a simple malfunction with a tap rack with just one hand, you might want to think about doing that. Find an instructor that will teach that.
Yeah.
But my point, my belabored point going in is try these weird things, get an instructor to help you. It saves you a lot of time. It's way safer, and you can see all kinds of neat shortcuts, and learn how to do this with your opposite side, with just one hand, either hand. For instance, do you know how to rack a slide and lock it back with just one hand? Can you do it with your non-dominant hand? Magazine changes, can you draw your gun that's on your dominant side with your non-dominant hand? Or try it? These are things
I have tried it. It's not simple. I have tried it.
I've changed the way I carry some guns. I'm not thin. You know, if I'm reaching behind doesn't work, but I know if I'm carrying, say, strong side, 3 o'clock position over the hip, which is my preferred because of the way I'm built and injuries, I can do that. It's awkward, but I can do it, and I've done it before, and I've made the mistakes, the gross ones, and I practiced around them, and I know I can do it consistently. Right now, I'm pocket carrying. I pocket carry in a holster, and I will tell you I carry in a cargo pocket because I can get to it. I can't get to that gun with my non-dominant hand in the regular trouser pocket, but I can get to it in a cargo pocket. How do I know that? Because I've done it, and I practiced it. And I've made the mistakes. So this is why you practice with an empty gun or a dummy gun. And I've gone through this, and I know how it's going to work. So if things go bad, I go, I knew this would happen, and I know what to do about it. Your mind's got a place to go.
Let me get a couple comments in here again, and because we've got some good ones coming in. Going back to Coop, CNT Designs and Arms. Coop says, I always try not to carry anything I can't drop fast in my gun hand. That was really hard when my kids had to be carried.
Yeah.
I imagine it would have been, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, what's the mission? The mission is to protect the kids, yeah.
Spartan 6. I consistently think about what ifs when I'm outside of my home, and have begun to do so inside as well. My frustration is getting my family to do the same. I'm going to say, Spartan 6, if you're doing it yourself, the battle is halfway won.
Hard part's getting your significant other to understand that. I'm very, very fortunate to have Diane as my spouse and my teaching partner and my life partner. We've been married a very, very long time. We started shooting together in 1971. We've always trained together. She's got at least as many training hours as I do, and some different than mine. She's got more vehicle experience than I do. So we make a pretty good team, but that's the exception, not the rule. You and I mutually know a couple now living in the Caribbean, where the female of the married couple was the gun person, and the husband was the kid wrangler. We have some younger relatives where the female is the best gun person, and the husband will be the kid wrangler. He's also armed, but we're currently working with them, helping them explore some strategy. However, if the person you hang out with a lot is like, oh, you're just being paranoid, that's cute that you have a gun, but you're not John Wayne, or whatever that may manifest itself as. You're going to have to find a way around it. Because I certainly do not recommend you give up carrying a gun.
One of my favorite phrases, and it would not work so well in response to that, especially if you're talking to a significant other, but one of my favorite phrases is, just because I'm paranoid does not mean they're not out to get me.
I think Henry Kissinger said that with a lot of big words, but yeah, it's true. Having seen the other side of the fence, once you see it, it's kind of hard to unsee. Once you know that bad stuff happens fast, and the bad guys plan this, they will ambush you. You are not going to have time to formulate a plan. You need to have some type of strategy in place, even the most basic one. It's always good to have a plan B and a plan C because, like Clausewitz said, the fog of war, no plan survives first contact. Things go south quickly, and if you're stuck in that one without the flexibility, because you've been there before or something similar that you can go to. Imagine the poor cops that got shot or knocked down or tripped or fell or slipped or whatever, ended up lying on the ground, had never shot from the ground before. Shooting equaled standing up, and they're trying to get up to shoot. Nobody had ever exposed them to that. That was one of the huge things that the late Jim Cirillo gave the gun culture, the self-defense community. The different experiences from different instructors. I tried something last week I'd never done before. I cleared malfunctions while I was moving, cover to cover. I could do it, but I don't know if I would have ordinarily thought of that if I hadn't been exposed to it. Now it's like, oh, that's no big deal. So getting the variety of training, but again, it comes back to the one-handed shooting. If you can do stuff under the most difficult conditions, stuff that the world throws at you tends to be a little less bad. Regardless, you can do it. The fact that things happen in the real world, the cuts, the boo-boos, the sprained, broken digits, gonna happen.
Yeah.
Gonna happen. You don't get to plan. You don't get to put it on your daytime. Excuse me, I'm aging myself. I said daytimer. On your calendar and your phone. Oh yeah, I'm going to lose the use of my index finger on such and such date. So that morning I'll take that extra holster with me and I'm just with it. You need to be able to adapt on the move, on the fly, like right now.
One more non-dominant turn that we're going to make here real quick. I'm going to put myself on camera here real quick, solo. And that is because of this. This past July, went up to Detroit to do help Rick Ector with his women's training weekend up there. The week before that was a windy week up here in Sioux Falls. And I was out driving around in my car getting some errands done, and I went to go close the door of my car, and on my dominant hand, and you can see on my thumb right there, still hasn't healed, thumb got slammed in car door when gust of wind took it. The entire time I was up helping to train in Detroit, my right thumb was not feeling very good. And so I was shooting left-handed.
I took an entire class one-handed, left-handed once just to see what it was like. And it's like, no big deal. But you have to do it. In the beginning, I talked about the way that it's taught. Okay, two hands. We teach it this way at least. Start out with two hands, and then go to one hand. Palm up because it engages more muscles here, and you're getting all this muscle engagement, and you're learning how to control the recoil with one hand. Try it with this arm dangling. Okay, arm is damaged. It's just dangling like it might more likely be, and see what that feels like too, because you lose that hand, it's still new territory. Oh, I don't know if I can shoot one-handed without my hand up here. Well, try it. If your range allows you to do that, try it with live ammo. Okay, and work on the non-dominant side too. You are deep in thought, and you have no audio.
I can fix that quick. I'm going to say, for me, I do some shooting one-handed, dominant hand, but north of 90% of my practice, one-handed shooting is with non-dominant hand. I still need to get it better. And until my non-dominant shooting one-handed is as good as my dominant one-handed shooting, I'm going to continue heavily leaning on that non-dominant.
Yeah, it's good to do that. And when we go to a range and there are other people looking, come on, especially guys, but I know women shooters too. You want to look good. I want to make those pretty tiny little groups or have those great split times, whatever it is. I don't do it near as well with my left hand as I do with my right. Got to get past that. I don't have the coordination as good in my left side as my right. And I find that my wobble zone is a lot bigger on the left side.
Mm-hmm.
They're equally strong. It's that neuromuscular thing we were talking about earlier. I've got to wire that to be able to stabilize that muscle, and the way to do it is with practice. I've got to wire that through practice to be able to handle the recoil with shooting one hand, the hand I don't usually shoot with. And the targets don't look good, but then you just channel all those cool lines from Princess Bride. I know something you don't know. I am not left-handed. Yeah. Try those manipulations. Try locking the slide back with one hand. Try it with your non-dominant hand. If you have a manual safety on your gun, typically manual safeties on guns are for right-handed shooters, the standard 1911, for instance, and it's not an ambi safety. Try it with your left hand. There are ways. Can you punch the magazine out? Can you lock the slide back with your left hand only? These are what ifs, and it just have to happen once in a lifetime. And if it doesn't, it does look cool, and you do get the little bit of ego stuff.
I will say this, it's a darn good argument for having all your guns ambi. Let's couple more comments, and we got to start shutting this down, man. Warsaw Patriot, another thing, and this is important, people are new to firearms and haven't shot every platform, need to train themselves on different platforms.
Good point.
It is a good point. I'm going to say concentrate on what you own. If you are just getting into shooting and you just bought a Glock, train with the Glock, get good with the Glock, and then worry about 1911, then worry about revolver, then worry about shotgun rifle. But I'm going to say if you're just getting into shooting, train with what you have and get good with that first.
As an instructor, that's something we have to do. So I don't teach with my preferred gun. My preferred gun are the 1911s, and mine are fairly nice, kind of expensive ones, and it's not good practice for an instructor to go into a beginning class with an expensive gun and shoot well and leave the student with the impression you have to have an expensive gun to shoot well. So I teach with a completely different gun. I teach with a Smith & Wesson M&P. Two completely different trigger presses. I practice with them both. have to be useful or have to be competent with a revolver, have to run them both. ARs and shotgun, have to be able to run them all. But the most important second gun you need to be able to run is the person's gun that you hang out with.
Yep.
Diane needs to be able to run all my stuff, and I need to be able to run hers.
The Lathrop household has three different brands of handguns.
Are any of them American, Paul?
Yes, one of them is.
Okay.
Three of them. No, two of the three are American, and the third one is Smyrna, Georgia, part of the United States.
I didn't know where it was defined, but I know where you're going.
But yeah, I can shoot everything. My wife and my wife and I'll just be open. We've got 2 Glocks, 2 Smith & Wessons shields, and we've got a car. And I can shoot all of them, as can. So we both practiced with all of the firearms. I'm seriously considering going all Glock simply because magazines. But
advantage.
All right, let me get a couple comments in here real quick. Spartan 6, it would be cool to be able to share stories with others about how SA Single Action helped or prevented some bad things from happening. And then Jesus Wins Bird of Michigan says, fear the man with one gun. He likely knows it well. That's a great saying that I've heard before. So, Tom, as usual, man, we didn't an hour ago, but we have now run a little bit over time. And now I really would like you to, if you would, what's coming up at Firearms Academy of Seattle? It's not the end of training season yet.
Oh, my goodness, no. I just looked ahead at the schedule. Usually I talk about the cool guest instructors we have. As we speak at this very moment, Steve Fisher is wrapping up his 3-day carbine class on the range. But we do have our own stock stuff. We teach typically on weekends, because that's when our clientele has time off. Ordinary citizens like you and I. Occasionally we'll throw in a Friday for some folks who want to do something different. But remember that we have the introductory classes for folks that's never fired a gun. We have fundamentals and familiarization, which if, okay, you did the intro class and you fired 50 rounds, but you want some more gun handling to see if it's something you want to do, we have that available. We have a concealed carry class one day that we're going to rename more accurately holster work. We'll teach applicable state and federal law, and then we get into our 2-day classes. We have a variety of stuff for real people to learn how to function competently and safely, make decisions with a gun in their hand. We're in the Pacific Northwest, about halfway on I-5 and a little to one side in the country between Portland and Seattle, although we're not in Seattle. 40-acre dedicated facility with a little over a dozen ranges, and our cool new business cards have a QR code. Take a look at the QR code, firearmsacademy.com.
All right. Well, we do got to get out of here, Tom. Thank you so much for another entertaining Training Friday, man.
Always a pleasure. It always makes me think of new stuff. It makes me think of old stuff in new ways, and it's a positive for me, and hopefully stimulate some conversations and thought with our listeners.
Absolutely. All right. That does wrap it up for the Monday through Friday editions of the Bullet this week. We're going to have one more Bullet tomorrow night. That's the weekend edition of the Bullet. I don't have co-hosts totally lined up yet, so Coop, if you're still watching, look out for an email. One will be coming. I got to fill a couple seats for tomorrow night yet. But come join me. Find out who's going to show up. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Central Time. And then that's it for Bullet and Polite Society podcast until I get back from Phoenix, where we're leaving lunchtime Monday to start driving us in the studio down to Phoenix. So that does it for us today. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you, everybody, for commenting. Podcast listeners, Love you, folks. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.